Hey, welcome back to Friday Night Flood. So glad you guys are here tonight. I just wanted to give you a super quick announcement before we get into our talk. Just wanted to say that we will not be having Friday Night Flood for the next 2 weeks. Just so you know, next Friday is our snowbound retreat, and so those of us who are going, we will not be here on Friday. We'll be there at Snowbound. And then the week after that is Easter weekend already. And so Easter weekend every year, the Friday before Easter Sunday is called Good Friday, if you didn't know. And so every year we have a Good Friday worship service. And you're all invited to that. It's in the gym. It's going to be a really powerful time, but it is not Friday Night Flood. So don't come expecting Friday Night Flood, but you're still invited. It's going to be an awesome night. And so that's at 7 o'clock. But anyway, just throwing those announcements out there for you guys. If we don't see you over the next 2 weeks, hope to see you back after that. Tonight we are on our last week of talks called Emotions. For this last week we've been talking about emotions and why they're important. I think sometimes we think of God or have this image of God in our minds as this like distant, emotionless, faraway person somewhere up there, whatever that means. And really that couldn't be farther from the truth. Number one, God is as close as your breath right now. And number two, we know that God is not an emotionless, just stoic being. We know that he has emotions. Emotions were his idea, actually. He designed us to have them. That's part of what it means to be made in the image of God, like the Bible tells us we are. God himself in the Bible is described as having many different emotions, joy, sadness, anger, kindness, and compassion. And so God created us to be moved by emotion as well. But it seems like today, and you might agree with me, that we in general as a culture don't really know how to talk about our emotions or handle them, which is increasingly becoming a huge problem. So, we're talking about emotions, and today, the last one that we're talking about is an emotion that honestly I don't think we talk about a whole lot. But everyone everywhere is intrigued by the idea of it, and I think everyone everywhere is ultimately searching for it. Today we're talking about an emotion called joy. Really quickly, I want to add in here that we are not talking about happiness. Happiness and joy are not the same thing, I would suggest to you. The two can get, interchanged for each other and mixed together, but I just want to suggest to you today that they're not actually the same thing. I think happiness is a temporary feeling. For example, I'm happy today because things are going well. Like things are going in my favor today, right? I'm having a good day. So I feel happy. I had pizza for lunch, and that makes me happy, right? I hung out with my friends today, and we laughed, and so that makes me happy. I bought some awesome new shoes, and that makes me happy. But joy is not the same thing as happiness. Happiness, I think, is an outside job, and joy is an inside job. Joy is an attitude that sometimes we have to choose. It's an emotion, but sometimes we have to choose it. Where happiness is more like a temporary emotion triggered by chemicals in your brain, I think. Joy is something deeper. Joy is something given to us by God. It's a soul thing, a heart thing, more than it is a chemical thing. And joy is like an enduring emotion and lens through which you see life. We can understand happiness pretty easily, but often joy doesn't make a lot of sense to us. To prove it to you, let me just share some of my favorite nonsensical Bible verses about joy, and maybe you'll understand what I mean. James 1:2 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds." Really? I'm gonna like what? Joy, I'm gonna consider it joy when I'm facing trials and troubles? That doesn't make any sense. Psalm 94:19 says, "When anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought me joy. Really? Like when anxiety is great within me, I can have joy. Those don't really fit together very well. Or John 16:22, Jesus is talking to his disciples and he's about to leave the earth. And they're grieving, they're crying, they're really distraught. And Jesus tells them, now is your time of grief, but I will see you again and you will rejoice. No one will take away your joy. And they're like, really? Like, we're crying right now? Like, we're devastated and you're talking about joy? See, joy is something that often doesn't make sense because it's way deeper than like a surface level temporary happiness. Joy is an emotion that can kind of lie beneath all of your other emotions if you're lucky. It's something that comes from having hope in spite of your current situation, in spite of your feelings of anxiety, in spite of the hard stuff that you're going through. Even if I don't feel happy today, I can still, on days like that, choose to have joy because I have hope and I have something deeper. Joy and happiness are not the same thing. And today I want to talk about how to have joy, that deep, lasting joy. So we've been talking about the emotions of Jesus. He experienced all kinds of emotions. He was 100% human, just like you and me. We've read all about Jesus feeling anxious, feeling sad, feeling angry. But I don't know how often we really think about Jesus as feeling joyful. Wasn't he just always super serious? Is joy even something that Jesus was able to feel? I just don't think we think of God very often as like being full of joy. The truth is, though, that we have a lot of reason to believe that Jesus was full of joy. There are several scriptures that say Jesus rejoiced, which means to literally just be full of joy. He often told his followers to rejoice as well. And we also know that he was kind of a partier, like who loved people. And I don't mean partier in the sense that you guys might hear it today, like raging alcoholic partier. I just mean that clearly, when you read the scriptures, he clearly just liked going to parties and being with people. The first miracle he ever did was at a party. I'm just saying, we have a lot of reasons to believe that people just liked hanging around Jesus because he was a guy who was full of joy. He radiated joy. He had a lot of other emotions too, but it is reasonable for us to believe that Jesus was full of joy. So in the scriptures, there are a particular set of stories that Jesus tells that are very interesting. And his joy specifically, is found at the end of each of these stories. Now, you've probably heard these stories before. They're called the lost stories in Luke 15, not because they're like lost to history or something like that, but because they're just literally about stuff that got lost. Jesus tells these stories in response to the church leaders of the day, who honestly have no joy at all, like zero, zip, none. They weren't ever joyful about anything. They mostly were always criticizing everything. And maybe you know someone like that. The sad thing is that I feel like I know a lot of people like that, which is why any meme like this one is so funny to me because it's so sadly true. I just know so many people like this. And so did Jesus. And it got so annoying to him that the churchy people who said they were full of God, it got so annoying to him that he told these stories. These religious people, they claim to be righteous and full of the Spirit of God, but there's a passage in the scriptures in Galatians 5 that tells us what it looks like when someone is full of the Spirit of God. You know what the second characteristic is on that list? Joy. Joy. If someone is full of God, they will have joy. You will know. And Jesus did, but these religious leaders did not. And so Jesus tells them these stories that are now very popular. You've probably heard them before, probably have heard them from me before. But he tells them these stories. One is about a sheep, one is about a coin, and one is about a lost son. And they all kind of go together. Prodigal son is how you might know the last story. But then at the end of each one of these stories, he talks about joy. which is kind of interesting, and you might be thinking, like, how does that really fit? So I'll just read you the first two stories today. They're in Luke 15. I would encourage you to go home and read the whole section, because all of these are really powerful stories. So it says this, and I'm reading from the Message paraphrase of the Bible. So it says, "By this time, a lot of men and women of questionable reputation were hanging around Jesus, listening intently. The Pharisees and the religious scholars were not pleased, not at all pleased. They growled, 'He takes in sinners and eats meals with them, treating them like old friends.' Their grumbling triggered this story." So Jesus says, "Suppose one of you had 100 sheep and lost one. Wouldn't you leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the lost one until you found it? When found, you can be sure you would put it across your shoulders, rejoicing. And when you got home, call in your friends and neighbors, saying, 'Celebrate with me, I've found my lost sheep.' You can count on it. There's more joy in heaven over one sinner's rescued life than over 99 good people in no need of rescue." Or imagine a woman who has 10 coins and loses one. Won't she light a lamp and scour the house, looking in every nook and cranny until she finds it? And when she finds it, you can be sure she'll call her friends and neighbors, "Celebrate with me, I found my lost coin." Count on it. That's the kind of party that God's angels throw every time one lost soul turns to God. And Jesus goes on to tell the story of the lost son. He doesn't actually get lost, as in he goes missing and no one knows where he is, but he was lost as in he just had totally lost his way in life. Like he was going in a direction that everyone knew he shouldn't be going. His soul was lost. Now, there's a lot in these stories. There's a story about a sheep and a coin, but they're not really a story about a sheep and a coin, right? They're stories about people. And Jesus was full of joy because what was happening is all of these unreligious-y, bad people were hanging out with him and listening to him teach God's word, and they were getting to know God, and he was so excited. He's like, "This is amazing." And all the church leaders, religious people, do is grumble and complain about how Jesus is hanging out with them. And Jesus is like, "Are you serious? Like, don't you see what's happening? This is amazing." And so he tells these stories to illustrate that when a person is lost, but then is found and comes back to God, we are to have joy. So much joy that we celebrate and throw a party. There's so much more that we could unpack in these stories, but we're talking about emotions, right? The emotions of Jesus. And so if you want to know what gives Jesus joy, what gives God joy, it's right there. Someone who's lost coming back to God is what brings Jesus the most joy. Now, in most of my messages, I like to try and think of like 3 big things that you can take away from the story, that you can, take home with you and learn, memorize or something. And honestly, I was trying to think of something like 3 big ways that you can, 3 ways that you can have joy in your life, or something catchy, clever like that. But I tried and I only have one thing to say today, really, and it's that if you want to know how to get joy, joy comes from knowing Jesus. Joy comes from being lost and then being found by God. If you really want to know how to have joy in your life, not just a fleeting happiness, but a joy that's really, really true and lasting, that is found in walking daily with Jesus, in having a relationship with God through Jesus, talking with Jesus. Jesus is the source of all joy. Now, you can take me at my word or not, or take the Bible at its word or not. You can go out and try a lot of different things in the world before you figure this out about joy. I did. It's what a lot of people do. But true, lasting joy that comes from deep inside, it doesn't come from any other place I know of than Jesus. Joy doesn't come from gifts. It doesn't come from having more stuff. It doesn't come from having a perfect family or having a perfect relationship. It doesn't even come from falling in love and getting married. It doesn't come from getting good grades or finally getting that degree. Like, lasting joy doesn't come from any of that stuff. We know it doesn't come from wit or genius. Voltaire was a man who lived a while ago. He was a great French philosopher, leader of the Enlightenment. And at the end of his life, he wrote, "I wish I had never been born." We know that joy doesn't come from having money. Jay Gould is one of the fathers of the railroad, and he was one of the richest people who ever lived in America. But when he was dying, he said, "I suppose I'm the most miserable man on earth." We know that joy doesn't come from everything that you accomplish. You can try really hard. But even Alexander the Great, who conquered the entire known world in his day, when he conquered the last nation, he went back to his tent and cried because he said, there are no more worlds to conquer. His accomplishments didn't bring him any lasting joy at all. We know that joy doesn't come from fame or how hard you work, how much money you have. Tom Brady, who we all know has 1 million Super Bowl rings, but even by the age of 30, he had several, and he gets paid $60 million a year, right? And in an interview, Tom Brady said to the interviewer, he was just like, "Why do I have so many Super Bowl rings and I still feel like there's something else? Like, there's got to be more to life than this." See, we can search far and wide for the answer to where to find deep, lasting joy in this life, but I'm telling you, you're not going to find it in anything that this world can give you. People have been trying that for thousands and thousands of years. The whole truth is that joy is found in knowing Jesus, having that hope of life forever with him. And if you're doing like a self-check right now, and you find that your life is like lacking this deep, lasting joy, that kind of joy, like that no matter what comes, you're still okay, and a joy that is way deeper than happiness, and a joy that is still there even when you're going through a tough day, when you lay your head on the pillow and you still have that joy in your heart even after a tough day. Like, if you're missing that kind of joy in your life, I would encourage you to just take one step toward Jesus today. Jesus is the source of all joy, and there's no greater joy in heaven or anywhere on earth than when someone who is lost comes back to God. There's a verse in Psalms written many years before Jesus, but it points ahead to the joy of Jesus and the source of joy, ultimately, that is Jesus. Psalm 16, I'll leave you with this today. It says, "I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand, I shall not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad, and my whole being rejoices. My flesh dwells secure. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." God, help us to know that in your presence, that's where we can find fullness of joy. God, I thank you just for your word. I thank you for your joy. God, that you are the source of all joy. I pray right now that if there's anyone in here who is just feeling like they're missing out on this joy, God, I pray that you would fill us with your joy today. I pray that we would pursue a relationship with you in our everyday lives, that we would talk with you and walk with you, and God, that we would know and trust that that is what will bring us ultimately joy. God, I thank you that you are the God of joy, that you delight in us, that you take joy in us, and that there's party being thrown in heaven whenever any lost person comes back to you. I thank you that heaven is rejoicing today. And God, I pray that your joy would rub off on us, and that we would be able to take it into the world, take it to our families. God, that we would just be marked by joy if we're following you. I thank you for each group. God, I pray that you'd give us joy tonight. And in these discussions, I pray that we'd just be open and honest, and that we'd be able to come back here in a few weeks to grow with you, continue to grow with each other. And we just pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.